In the snow-covered town of Ashridge, Malik Bryant, a black homeless veteran in a worn military coat, quietly stepped into a roadside diner, simply searching for peace and warmth. But that peace didn't last long. The moment two white officers, Reddick and Connors, spotted him, they began mocking and humiliating him. It escalated quickly until they forcibly dragged him out and threw him behind bars. What they didn't know was that this black veteran's name still echoed through Pentagon records, and it would be him who would go on to expose a secret network within their law enforcement agency, unravel deep-rooted corruption they had hidden for years, and force America to re-examine the way it treats its veterans and its poor. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if these stories move you as much as they move us, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's chapter will shake the foundation of everything we thought we knew about justice. Snow fell in thick, slow flakes over the quiet town of Ashridge, blanketing sidewalks, rooftops, and pickup trucks in a soft, indifferent white. The streets were nearly empty, save for a few bundled-up figures rushing from storefronts to cars, their heads bowed against the wind. At the far end of Main Street, under the flickering neon sign of the Silver Spoon Diner, a man approached on foot. His boots cracked and salt-stained, pressed into the slush with a steady rhythm as if he had nowhere to be. Malik Bryant paused at the door. He was a large black man, maybe 6'2", with a frame that had once been built for endurance, but now bore the wear of years spent surviving more than living. His military jacket faded green, the U.S. Army patch, almost illegible, hung heavy on his shoulders. A short beard covered the lower half of his face, dotted with ice crystals. His eyes, deep-set and tired, scanned the diner through the frosted window. Inside, warmth glowed golden. A family of four laughed over plates of pancakes. An older couple sat close, their hands touching. No one looked like him. Malik brushed the snow off his shoulders, straightened his posture, and opened the door. A bell chimed overhead. The reaction was immediate. Conversations faltered. Forks paused mid-air. A waitress stopped pouring coffee. People looked, then quickly looked away. A young mother pulled her daughter a little closer. A man at the counter shifted his wallet deeper into his coat. The heater buzzed loudly in the awkward silence. Malik didn't flinch. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. The cold dropped from his coat in soft drips. His eyes scanned the room, practiced and deliberate. 2 exits, one behind the kitchen one where he'd entered. 2 police officers sat in the corner booth, heads down over their food. He recognized the type instantly, not their faces, but the posture, the entitlement. He took the stool closest to the door. Back straight, hands visible, nothing in his pockets but a worn leather dog tag and 6 crumpled dollars. He didn't ask for permission to exist. He didn't explain why he was there. He sat. Across the room, one of the officers, stocky, red-faced mid-40s, looked up from his eggs and snorted under his breath. "Must be garbage night," he muttered to his partner. The other one smirked, eyes flicking briefly to Malik. "Better count the silverware before he leaves." Malik heard them. Of course he did. But he didn't move. He just stared at the faded menu on the wall, lips pressed into a tight line, jaw locked. A waitress approached, maybe 23, ponytail, under a gray cap name tag, crooked on her apron. She hesitated, tray in hand. Malik met her eyes, calm, clear, unblinking. "Just a coffee," he said quietly. "Black, please." She blinked, then nodded. "Coming right up." The tension eased by a thread, but it was still there, coiled tight in every glance. Malik lowered his gaze to the counter, letting the warmth of the place seep in slowly. It had been 3 days since he'd stepped foot indoors. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted to eat, like a man, like anyone else. But in towns like Ashridge, some people only saw the uniform when it was fresh, and forgot the man who wore it when it wasn't. The warmth of the coffee seeped into Malik's hands as he wrapped his fingers around the mug. The ceramic was chipped near the rim, but to him it felt like a small comfort after 3 days sleeping on concrete and newspaper. He brought it to his lips, took a slow sip, and exhaled quietly. It was the first real moment of peace he'd had all week. From the corner booth, the sound of a loud chuckle cut through the quiet hum of the diner. The 2 policemen were looking at Malik with a mocking, contemptuous expression. They were talking to each other as if he were nothing more than a tool to make them laugh. "Bet he came in here 'cause the sidewalk finally got colder than that garbage heap he sleeps in," Sergeant Reddick said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. His partner, Officer Connors, leaned back in his seat and looked toward the counter where Malik sat. His eyes were sharp, small, and amused. "Careful with the silverware," Alina Connors added, addressing the waitress by name without even glancing at her. "Wouldn't want our new guest to walk out with a souvenir." Laughter followed. Mean, lazy laughter. Malik didn't turn. His eyes stayed on the coffee, but his right hand, resting near the edge of the counter, curled into a slow, controlled fist before relaxing again. His jaw clenched, just for a second. He'd heard it all before. Different voices, same words. People didn't need to know your name to strip you of your dignity. Across the counter, the waitress named Alina, early 20s, white with tired eyes and a kind face, hesitated before stepping forward. She moved with care, like someone trying to walk across glass without making it crack. She refilled Malik's cup without asking. "Let me know if you need a top off, okay?" she said, gently, almost too quiet to be heard. Malik met her gaze for a moment. It was the only look in the diner that didn't carry judgment or fear. "Just humanity. Thank you," he replied. His voice was low, rough from cold nights, and silence, but unmistakably steady. Alina nodded once, then glanced toward the corner booth. Reddick had caught the exchange and raised his coffee cup to her with a mocking smirk. She ignored him. Back at the booth, Connors leaned in. "See the way he said thank you, like he's still trying to act civilized." Reddick snorted again. "That's what kills me. These people serve a couple years, think they're heroes forever, then expect the world to pay their bills when life hits back." Malik's shoulders tensed, but he didn't move. He kept his eyes down and took another sip. His breath slowed as he forced it to stay even. He didn't owe anyone a reaction. Not anymore. He'd learned that long ago in the mess halls overseas, in the waiting rooms of the VA, on sidewalks where people crossed the street to avoid him. He didn't respond to cowards, but he never forgot the weight of their words either. And as the silence fell again, heavy and uncomfortable, others in the diner started to notice. A father at the next booth shifted in his seat. A college student glanced between the officers and Malik. No one said anything. But the ugliness in that corner booth didn't go unnoticed. Not this time. The plate of food was gently placed in front of Malik with a soft thud. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a dinner roll. It wasn't much, but to him it was warmth on a plate, proof he was still human in a world that often forgot. Alina offered a small smile as she stepped back. Malik gave a quiet nod in return. He hadn't even picked up his fork yet when it happened. From the booth behind him, a packet of sugar arced through the air and landed on his plate right next to the meatloaf. Sergeant Reddick's voice followed, sharp and mocking. "Go on, do something to earn it, friend. Ain't that how it works these days?" A few people chuckled nervously. Others went dead quiet. The air in the diner tightened like a pulled wire. Alina froze behind the counter, her smile vanishing. Malik didn't move for a moment, just stared down at the white packet sitting like an insult beside his food. Then he reached out, slow, deliberate. 2 fingers lifted the sugar packet. He stood. The stool scraped lightly against the floor. Not loud, but loud enough to make every eye turn. A teenage boy in the corner, maybe 15, pulled out his phone and began recording. No one stopped him. Malik turned and walked the 10 steps to the corner booth, where Reddick and Connors sat leaning back like they owned the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He placed the sugar packet on their table, right between their coffee cups. "I paid for that meal with blood in Fallujah," he said quietly. "I don't owe another damn thing." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Reddick blinked, caught off guard. Connors shifted in his seat. Across the diner, forks stayed frozen halfway to mouths. Conversations halted mid-word. No one laughed. Malik turned back to his seat without waiting for a response. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just sat down again, lifted his fork, and began to eat. The tension didn't lift. It sat in the room like a storm cloud with no rain. And yet beneath the discomfort, something shifted. People had seen it, really seen it. A man insulted, shamed in front of strangers who still stood tall and gave back dignity without ever raising his voice. It was quiet but undeniable. Something had started, and it wasn't going to stop there. A chair scraped hard against the floor. Sergeant Reddick stood up, slow and deliberate. His thick frame blocked the narrow aisle as he stepped toward Malik's seat. Officer Connors followed, cracking his knuckles as if stretching before a workout. The energy in the diner shifted. Every eye turned. Malik looked up. He didn't speak. He just put his fork down beside his plate, wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin, and sat up straight, his shoulders squared chin level. "You've had your little moment," Reddick said, voice low but sharp. "Now it's time to go. I've paid for my meal." Malik answered calm and measured. "I'm not disturbing anyone." Connors smirked. "That's the thing. Just being here, you are." Without another word, Reddick reached out and grabbed Malik by the arm, yanking him to his feet with unnecessary force. The stool clattered to the ground. Malik didn't resist, but his face tightened in pain. Connors came in from the side and shoved him forward. Gasps broke through the room like cracks in glass. "Stop, stop!" Alina's voice rang out from behind the counter. She took a step forward, hands shaking. "He didn't do anything." Reddick didn't turn. "This is official business," he snapped. "You want to interfere? You can come too." Alina's throat closed. Her heart pounded. Her hands fumbled under her apron, finding her phone. She didn't even think, just hit record and kept it low by her waist. Before they shoved him outside, he turned his head, caught Alina's eyes through the crowd, and spoke with a calm urgency that cut through the noise. "If anything happens to me," he said, clear and steady call, "General Jeremiah Sawyer, Pentagon. Tell him Malik Bryant is in trouble." Alina froze. The name didn't register right away, but his tone did. It wasn't desperation, it was trust. A final card played only by someone who'd earned it. Then Connors shoved him forward. The two officers dragged Malik through the narrow aisle. His boots scraped against the tile body, bouncing between their grips. His dog tags, hanging from a thin chain around his neck, swung free. As they reached the door, the chain snapped. The metal tags hit the ground with a sharp, metallic clink. Connors looked down, then stepped directly on them with a sick grin. "Veteran, huh?" he said, grinding his heel. "Just another parasite looking for a free ride." Alina couldn't breathe. She dropped to her knees, reached out, and picked up the chain. Her fingers trembled as she turned the cold metal in her hand. "Bryant Malik, U.S. Army Blood Type O+. Her eyes burned. Outside, the officer slammed Malik against the side of the patrol car. His body folded slightly with the impact. Still, he didn't fight. He just turned his face to the side, eyes locking on Alina through the diner window. There was no anger there. Only disappointment. People watched from inside. No one moved. Alina stood frozen, clutching the tags in one hand, phone still recording in the other, her stomach twisted with shame and rage. This wasn't just wrong. It was a betrayal of everything she thought this country was supposed to stand for. And in that moment, she made a choice. She wouldn't be a bystander. Not this time. Alina sat alone in the employee restroom of the Silver Spoon Diner, the sound of the heater rattling weakly behind her. Her hands trembled as she held Malik's dog tags in one palm, the cold metal pressing into her skin. In the other, her phone screen glowed with the Pentagon's main number typed in, ready to dial. She stared at it. Her stomach was in knots. Everything about it felt ridiculous. She was just a waitress in a diner in a nowhere town. And here she was about to call the Department of Defense because a homeless man told her to. But that look in Malik's eyes, it hadn't been delusion. It was clarity, resignation, and a request made only when someone had nothing left. She took a breath, deep, steadying. Then she hit call. The line rang 3 times before a calm female voice answered. "Department of Defense. How may I direct your call?" Alina hesitated, her throat dry. I need to speak to General Jeremiah Sawyer," she said, trying to sound steady. "It's about Malik Bryant. He's in trouble." There was a pause, longer than it should have been. 1 moment. Click. Then silence. A deeper kind. Alina could hear her own heartbeat. She looked down again at the tags. Bryant Malik, U.S. Army Blood Type O+. The call picked up. "This is Colonel Barnes, assistant to General Sawyer. Who is this?" "My name is Alina Harper. I work at the Silver Spoon Diner in Ashridge, Pennsylvania. Malik Bryant was just arrested. 2 officers dragged him out violently. He told me, if something happened, to call this number." Another pause. "You're sure?" he said. "General Sawyer, yes. He said he served with him, that he saved his life." The colonel didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Hold, please." Alina gripped the phone tighter, her pulse racing. A new voice came through the line. This one older, firm, sharp. "This is General Sawyer." Alina froze for a split second, then said the words clearly. "Malik Bryant is in trouble." There was silence on the other end, and then everything changed. "Tell me exactly what happened," the general said. His voice was calm but urgent. She told him everything she had seen. Everything she had filmed, how the officers treated Malik like he was nothing, how they stepped on his dog tags. When she finished, the lines stayed quiet. She could hear shuffling papers, a pen tapping. Then the general spoke. "You did the right thing, Miss Harper. I want you to send that video recording to my office. My aide will give you a secure number." "Yes, sir," Alina whispered. "Then I want you to go home and stay there. Do not speak to anyone else about this until further notice." "Understand, yes, sir." When the call ended, Alina sat still, breath catching in her throat. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel powerless. Somebody up there had listened, somebody who knew Malik, who respected him, and that meant everything was about to change. The holding cell at the Ashridge Police Department was cold and dim, lit by a single flickering bulb overhead. Malik sat on the metal bench, back straight, hands resting on his knees. His jacket had been taken, and a thin scratch ran along his cheekbone from where Connors had shoved him into the patrol car. But his eyes were steady, focused. He wasn't thinking about the insult or the pain. He was running through breathing patterns, counting his breaths, a technique he'd learned during recovery at Walter Reed. Keep the mind centered. Don't let the walls close in. Down the hall, footsteps echoed fast, deliberate. Then a door swung open with force. "Stand up, Mr. Bryant." Malik looked up. Two individuals in dark suits stood at the door, badges held up. They weren't local. Their posture, their presence said one thing: federal. The woman stepped forward. "Special Agent Monroe, Department of Defense, Internal Affairs. This is Agent Torres. We're here at the request of General Jeremiah Sawyer." Malik's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in his chest. A breath he hadn't even realized he was holding released quietly. Monroe continued, "You're being released immediately. All charges have been dropped. Let's get you out of here." Malik stood slowly. No sudden moves. That habit never left. He nodded once. Understood. As they walked down the corridor toward the front desk, the air shifted. Officers turned their heads. One whispered. The others moved aside. Malik's boots echoed on the tile floor with each step. Behind the front desk, Officer Barnes was arguing with the sheriff. "You can't just walk in here with some badges and override." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Malik flanked by the agents. Agent Torres stepped forward. "Officers Barnes and Connors," he said with clipped precision, "you are both subjects of an active investigation into excessive force and civil rights violations involving a decorated U.S. Army veteran. Effective immediately, you are removed from duty pending review." The sheriff, an older man with a face that had seen too many compromises, just nodded his jaw tight. "This department will cooperate," he said quickly, "completely." Connors stood near the back, frozen. His eyes met Malik's for a split second, no longer full of smugness. This time they showed something else. Panic. Malik didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He stepped through the lobby doors, sunlight cutting through the cloudy sky just enough to warm his face. He squinted slightly and took in the air. It smelled clean, crisp. A black SUV waited at the curb. The driver opened the door without a word. Malik turned back for one brief moment. Inside that building, justice had finally stepped in. Quiet, clean, and undeniable. Then he climbed into the vehicle. He didn't look back. The hotel room was plain, 4 walls, 1 lamp, a bed no one had touched. Malik sat at the small desk, elbows resting on the edge, staring at the burner phone the Department of Defense had handed him. The screen blinked twice, then displayed one word: secure. He took a slow breath and answered. Malik came the voice on the other end. Calm, controlled, familiar. "This is Sawyer." Malik sat back in the chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "General, you held the line," Sawyer said, "and you stayed clean doing it. I'm proud of you." There was a pause. Malik's voice, when it came, was steady. "I didn't have much choice. You know how I was trained, and I know what you're capable of," Sawyer replied, "which is why I'm activating the old team." Malik straightened. "You're sure, after what I've seen?" "Yes. Ashridge isn't just a case of bad apples. It's systemic. There's a group inside the local police department. They call themselves the Sentinels, and they've been operating with quiet approval from higher up. It's not just corruption, it's organized." Malik's jaw tensed. He didn't say anything. "I've already contacted Q, Ghost, and Trace. They'll be wheels up in 6 hours. I'll route them to your location." "Understood," Malik said simply. "One more thing," Sawyer added. "You're not doing this alone. I'm sending legal support. A civil rights attorney. She knows her way around departments like this. Her name is Zahara Cole." That name hit with weight. He remembered her from the headlines, a no-nonsense black woman with sharp suits and sharper questions. She didn't take shortcuts. She didn't take bribes. And she didn't lose. She'll reach out within the hour, Sawyer said. Keep her close. The line clicked off. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Malik opened it to find Zahara Cole standing in the hallway, briefcase in hand, expression unreadable. Mr. Bryant, she said, offering her hand. Let's get to work. Inside, she opened the case, set up a laptop, and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. I've already started reviewing Ashridge PD's history, Zahara began. Her tone was calm, clipped. Every word carried weight. Excessive force complaints, unexplained disappearances, patterns that match other towns with suppressed homeless populations. She looked up. I've seen this before. Different uniforms, same system. The Sentinels are using policy to justify abuse, then covering it with paperwork. Malik nodded slowly. So what's the plan? We start digging. We build a case. We expose them. For the first time in days, Malik felt something shift inside. Hope. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was strategy. It was war with rules and people who actually knew how to fight it. And he wasn't alone anymore. The motel room had become a war room. Laptops hummed across the table, cords snaked between surge protectors and hard drives. The smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. Q sat hunched over his keyboard, eyes locked on a stream of encrypted transactions. His fingers moved fast, decoding, rerouting, chasing digital shadows. Mia, seated beside him, tapped her tablet with controlled urgency. That's the third transfer in a month to Connor's private account, she said, her voice low but sharp. Valoron Industries, offshore routing Cayman Islands. Ghost, pacing near the window, stopped and turned. That's not just bribery. That's a pipeline, a system. Zahara stood with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the data projected on the wall. Her posture was still, but her jaw was clenched. How much, she asked without looking away. Q spoke without missing a beat. 34,000 last quarter, just to Connor's. Reddick's account closer to 50. Malik leaned in from the corner where he'd been silently watching. Where's the money coming from? Mia answered. Valoron calls it community improvement incentives. They pay officers who assist in clearing targeted zones. Translation, harass, arrest, or relocate the homeless, the poor, and especially veterans. Zahara stepped closer to the screen. And then what Valoron buys up the properties exactly Q confirmed. They've been purchasing foreclosed homes, empty lots, and condemned buildings all in the same zones where complaints against officers spike. Ghost tossed a file onto the table. I traced building permits. They move fast. Tear down old housing, throw up luxury units. Rent doubles. Locals can't afford to stay. Mia pulled up a map. Look at this. She pointed to color-coded neighborhoods. The red zones. That's where the majority of force complaints happened over the past 2 years. It perfectly overlaps with Valoron's real estate development footprint. Silence settled over the room for a beat. Then Malik spoke, his voice quiet but heavy. So it was never about public safety. Zahara turned to him. No, it's about money. Always has been. They turned police officers into real estate agents with guns. Everyone felt it. The shift. This wasn't just a case of bad cops. It was a network. System designed to exploit the vulnerable, enrich the powerful, and weaponize law enforcement under the guise of revitalization. Zahara picked up her phone. This goes beyond a lawsuit. We're talking RICO, conspiracy, fraud, civil rights violations. Malik nodded once. Let's take it all the way. For the first time, the team wasn't just responding. They were going on the offensive. And somewhere in the heart of Ashridge, the people who thought they were untouchable had no idea the walls were starting to close in. The shelter's common room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Zahara sat across from a man who looked older than the years behind his eyes. His name was Arthur Penn, 72 years old, former artillery sergeant, Iraq war veteran, now just another man the system had forgotten. She clicked the recorder on her phone. You okay with me recording? She asked gently. Arthur gave a slow nod. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the sleeves of his frayed flannel jacket. Yeah, he said. Don't know if anyone will care, but might as well get it out. Zahara didn't speak. She just listened. That she'd learned was the most powerful thing you could offer someone who's been ignored too long. They picked me up outside the bus depot. Arthur began, eyes locked somewhere far away. I wasn't bothering nobody. Just resting. My feet hurt. Got nerve damage from the army. Doc said it'd get worse with age. He paused. 2 officers. Didn't even ask my name. Just said I was loitering with intent. Whatever the hell that means. Threw me in the back like a damn bag of trash. Zahara swallowed hard. Arthur's voice cracked. They drove me 25 miles out, deep into the woods outside of Linton Ridge. Cold as hell that night. No coat, no shoes. Just told me to find my way somewhere else. Then they left. She stared at him. No report, no booking. He shook his head. Didn't matter to them. I wasn't a person. Just a problem. She leaned forward slightly. What happened next walked for hours. Didn't know where I was going. Got lucky some guy hauling lumber found me in the ditch damn near frozen. Gave me a ride back to town. Never saw him again. Don't even know his name. Zahara blinked hard and looked away for a moment, pretending to check her notes. Arthur took a deep breath. I ain't perfect, he said, but I wore that uniform. I stood in the sand with mortars coming in from God knows where, and I stayed. Some of those boys didn't come back, and I sure as hell never thought I'd end up like this. The room stayed quiet. Zahara looked up again. How long you been homeless on and off since my wife passed? That was 15 years ago. VA lost the benefits paperwork, delayed her chemo. She was gone in 3 months. After that, I kind of just unraveled. Zahara reached for a tissue, handed it to him without a word. He took it with a nod, dabbed his eyes, then folded it neatly on his lap. You know what hurts the most? Arthur asked, voice barely above a whisper. Not the cold, not the hunger. It's knowing there's not even a footnote for us. We gave this country everything, and in the end, we're just erased. Zahara's hand tightened on her notebook. She had interviewed 19 veterans that week. 19 stories. 19 versions of the same injustice. This wasn't coincidence. It was policy. And it was time the country heard every word. The light from Alina's laptop cast soft shadows across the motel room walls. Her fingers moved with purpose, dragging clips onto a timeline, trimming audio syncing photos with voiceover. Q sat nearby, monitoring server activity and traffic. They hadn't slept. Neither of them cared. Alina clicked play. On screen, the video began with an old photograph. Malik in uniform standing beside his unit in Iraq, sunlight behind them, dust clinging to their boots. He looked younger, proud, his posture straight as steel. The screen faded to black. Then slowly, the next image appeared. Malik being shoved face first into a patrol car, his hands cuffed, blood trickling from his cheek, his dog tags crushed under a boot. Alina's voice came in clear and calm. This man served 3 tours overseas. He earned a Silver Star for bravery. He survived war zones. But last week, he was beaten and arrested in the same country he fought for because he was homeless. She paused the clip, turned to Q. Add the footage of Arthur. The forest drop. Q nodded. Got it. They added more brief but gut-wrenching clips, interviews Zahara had filmed, photos of veterans in uniform followed by cell phone footage of them being harassed, pushed handcuffed, stripped of dignity by the very institutions they once defended. Alina leaned back, staring at the screen. It's not just about Malik, she said. It's about all of them. Q tapped a few keys. Uploading now. Platform everyone that matters. We'll launch it at the top of the hour. Title Alina didn't hesitate. The man in uniform they kicked off Main Street. He hit enter. Within minutes, the video spread like wildfire. By hour 3, it had over 200,000 views. By hour 6, 500,000. By the 12th hour, it crossed 1 million. And the hashtag #JusticeForMalik was everywhere. Veterans reposted it. Nurses who had served in field hospitals, teachers who lost students to war, strangers who saw their father, brother, cousin in Malik's eyes. The comments poured in. This made me cry. My dad served too. I used to think homelessness was a choice. Not anymore. How do we help? Where do we sign? News outlets picked it up. National anchors asked questions. Talk shows booked panels. Politicians released statements. And for the first time since that night at the diner, Malik's name was not whispered in shame or silence. It was shouted with anger, shared with urgency. Alina sat on the edge of the motel bed, watching the view count tick upward. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They see it now, she whispered. They finally see it. Q gave a slow nod. They're awake. Let's make sure they don't go back to sleep. Alina stood outside the Silver Spoon Diner in the early morning chill, an envelope in her hand, inside her final paycheck, and a note scribbled in red marker, traitor. No signature, no farewell, just the silence of coworkers who once shared coffee with her, now refusing to make eye contact. She didn't cry, not here. Instead, she walked back to the car, turned the key, and drove to the team's temporary HQ without a word. But inside, her stomach twisted, not from regret but from the weight of being suddenly branded the enemy. That same afternoon, Rachel opened her mailbox and froze. A plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper printed in bold block letters, "Stop or regret it. We know where you live." Her hands trembled. She scanned the street, the rooftops. Every parked car felt like a threat. She took a shaky breath, then walked inside, locked every door, and called Zahara. Zahara's voice was calm, almost too calm. "They're trying to rattle us," she said. "And if they're reacting this fast, it means what we're doing is working." But even Zahara wasn't untouchable. That evening, she received a formal letter from a law firm representing the Ashridge Police Benevolent Union. The accusation, defamation, and malicious interference with public officials. A thinly veiled threat designed to drain time, resources, and courage. She placed the letter neatly on the table and looked across the room at Malik. "They want me to back down." He didn't hesitate. "You won't." "No," she said, "but they're escalating." At 2:30 in the morning, it escalated again. Mia was the first to arrive at the makeshift HQ, a vacant office above an abandoned hardware store. The front door had been kicked in, the desks overturned, hard drives smashed, coffee spilled across the floor like blood. Q and Ghost arrived minutes later. Security cameras Q asked, offline. Loop feed, professional. Zahara arrived in silence, stepped through the wreckage, and exhaled slowly. They wanted to destroy everything, but they didn't. Q said. He knelt beside one of the busted towers. "We backed up everything last night. Triple encrypted cloud archive. They hit the front, but they didn't touch the real intel." Mia pulled out her laptop from a hidden case. Within seconds, the files blinked to life. All operational. Everything still there. Zahara looked at the group, each of them steady despite the attack. This wasn't just intimidation, she said. It was desperation. Malik crossed his arms, eyes hard. "They thought we'd fold." "No," Zahara replied, voice cold and clear. "They forgot who they were messing with." Outside, dawn broke slowly. The town remained asleep. But inside that shattered office, the line had been drawn. The system had struck back, and now they were going to strike harder. The knock came at 11 in the morning. Sharp, measured, not frantic, not aggressive, just official enough to make Rachel's heart skip. Through the peephole stood a clean-cut man in a navy suit and long coat. He flashed a leather badge wallet too fast for her to study. "Detective Harris, Ashridge District Attorney's Office," he said. "I'm following up on your testimony. We'd like to clarify some timeline points regarding the diner incident and your footage." Rachel hesitated. Her instinct flickered. Something felt rushed. But the man's voice was calm, professional. "I know you've been under pressure," he continued. "This won't take long. Just a short, in-person debrief. We can go to our field office on Elm." She glanced at her phone. No new messages from Zahara. No alerts from the group. "You don't need to bring anything," he added. "Just yourself. The sooner we get this done, the sooner you can get back to your day." She nodded slowly. "Okay, just give me a second to grab my coat." He smiled, polite but detached. "Take your time." Inside, Rachel slipped on her jacket and instinctively reached for the backup recorder that Q had secured inside the lining. She didn't know why, maybe because Zahara had told her, "If anything ever feels too smooth, record it." As she got into the unmarked car, she noticed it had no municipal tags, no department seal, just plain plates. The drive wasn't long, but the turns didn't match anything near Elm Street. "Where exactly are we?" she began. "Detour," he cut in. "Roadwork on 9th. Rachel thought it was a follow-up interview, but the drive didn't head downtown. It veered off course within 10 minutes, cutting past Ashridge's edge and into the warehouse district, abandoned, dark, forgotten. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. The man opened her door. Rachel hesitated. "This doesn't look like..." That was when the second man appeared from behind, grabbing her arm hard and yanking her out. The first man's voice dropped all pretense. "You made a lot of noise, waitress. Let's see if you scream now." They dragged her into the building. Her wrists were zip-tied. Her phone was taken. They shoved her into a metal chair inside a freezing concrete room. No lights. One flickering bulb in the corner. Duct tape over the windows. Sergeant Reddick stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smile cold. "You think you're some kind of hero," he sneered. "You're a waitress with a camera. That's all. And you stuck your nose in a hornet's nest." Rachel tried to stay calm. Her wrists were zip-tied, her breathing shallow. But her mind moved fast. Inside her coat lining taped tight was her backup recorder. Q had given it to her. just in case. She shifted slightly, trying not to make it obvious. The mic was live. Reddick walked closer. His boots echoed on the floor. Bums. Junkies. Veterans or not, they're garbage. And this town's better without them. He leaned in, voice low and dripping with hate. People like you defending them. You'll be gone too. Rachel didn't flinch. Back at the team's safe house, Malik stood over a monitor, eyes locked on the blinking dot. Rachel's emergency tracker, also in her coat, had gone stationary near the old Grant Steel warehouse. She's not moving, Mia said, tapping into a thermal drone hovering nearby. 2 heat signatures inside, 1 pacing, 1 seated, unarmed. Let's go, Malik said. No weapons, no confrontation. In extract out. Q, sync the comms. Ghost prepped the gear. Zahara stayed back, ready to call DOJ contacts if it escalated. 10 minutes later, the team moved silently across the warehouse perimeter. Malik led. He moved like he had in Fallujah, each step measured breath, quiet focus, absolute. Through the drone feed, Mia guided them to the north door. Guards walking the south wall. You have 10 seconds to breach. Malik's fingers found the latch. He counted down 3, 2, 1 and pushed in. Inside, Rachel looked up just as the door swung open. Malik, she breathed. Let's get you out, he said, slicing her zip ties with one swift move. Behind them, Reddick shouted, What the hell? But Ghost stepped forward, cool and calm. This is a federal rescue operation. Stay where you are. Reddick froze. The drone above captured everything, including his face. Back outside, Rachel collapsed into Zahara's arms. I kept the recording, she whispered, voice raw. Every word. He said they don't deserve to live. Malik glanced toward the warehouse, jaw tight. We're done hiding, he said. They wanted war in the dark. He looked at Rachel, steady and certain. We'll bring justice into the light. The studio lights were warm, but Zahara Cole's posture was ice calm and resolute. She stood behind a podium, flanked by American flags, a microphone in front of her, a quiet storm of documents in a binder clutched tightly in her hands. Malik stood off-camera, arms crossed, watching alongside Rachel and Alina, who both looked tense but hopeful. Across from them, rows of journalists sat with pens poised and cameras rolling. Zahara looked directly into the lens. For far too long, she began, her voice clear. Our veterans, those who served with honor, who wore the uniform of this country, have been discarded, dehumanized, and systematically targeted, not because they committed any crime, but because they were poor, because they were struggling, because it was profitable. She opened the binder with a precise motion. Today we are announcing the filing of a nationwide class action lawsuit. 112 veterans across 6 states, from different branches, backgrounds, and wars, all with the same story. She paused to let that land. Beaten, displaced, arrested for being visible, criminalized for surviving, and the institutions that allowed this city's police departments and private corporations will now be held accountable. Reporters burst into questions. One stood. Miss Cole, is this directly tied to the Ashridge case? Zahara nodded. It began in Ashridge with Malik Bryant. But it didn't end there. What we uncovered is not an isolated incident, it's a pattern, and it is bigger than any one town. The footage that followed played on every major network that night. The video of Malik's arrest, the drone footage of Rachel's rescue, the audio of Reddick's words filled with contempt. Within hours, national conversation ignited. Veterans organizations reposted the clip with statements of solidarity. Universities opened forums. Law professors called it one of the most important civil rights challenges of the decade. Senators tweeted support. Congressional committees announced emergency hearings. And across the country, people started talking not about partisan politics, but about what it meant to protect those who once protected them. At a coffee shop in Detroit, a Vietnam veteran wiped tears as he watched the screen. At a high school in rural Colorado, a history teacher paused her lecture to play the video, saying, This is how justice begins. In Ashridge, flowers appeared on the steps of the old warehouse where Rachel had been held. A note attached read, We see you now. We're with you. Back in the motel turned command post, Q refreshed the server analytics. 2 million views in 8 hours, he said softly. Malik didn't smile, but he breathed easier. They tried to bury us, Alina said, watching the screen glow. Malik finally looked at her. No, he replied, they just watered the roots. And in that moment, the movement wasn't just surviving, it was growing. The night air at Ashridge's private airstrip was thick with tension. The hum of an idle jet engine buzzed low in the background, its lights casting eerie reflections across the wet tarmac. Captain Reddick moved fast, duffel bag in hand, his coat collar turned up against the cold. His pace wasn't panic, it was calculation. But Malik was already waiting near the hangar entrance, standing dead in his path. Reddick froze mid-step, the duffel slipping slightly from his shoulder. "You," he spat. Malik didn't move. "You sold your soul for a condo on Main Street," Malik said quietly. "I lost everything in war. My wife, my house, my brothers, but not my soul." Reddick sneered, adjusting the grip on his bag. "You think this changes anything? You people, you never win. You cause a mess, make noise, then crawl back to your corners when the lights turn on." Malik stepped closer. "We turned the lights on this time, and the whole damn country saw what crawled out." Reddick's eyes darted around, calculating. Then, without warning, his hand shot toward his waistband. Gun Malik shouted. From the shadows, 2 FBI agents emerged. One yelled, "Drop it." Reddick didn't listen. He drew. The shot rang out a split second later, one clean round to the shoulder. He dropped with a scream, clutching the wound, his weapon clattering to the asphalt. Agents swarmed him in seconds, shouting commands as they disarmed and cuffed him. One kicked the duffel aside and unzipped it. Neatly packed bundles of cash spilled out $500,000. Malik knelt beside the bag and picked up a smaller pouch that had fallen loose. Inside a black, leather-bound notebook. No markings on the cover. An agent flipped it open. Names, dozens of them. Politicians, judges, business owners. Next to each, figures meeting dates, payments received. The agent looked up. "It's a payoff ledger." Malik stared down at Reddick as he groaned on the ground. "You ran a war on your own people," he said, "but this time there's no bunker to hide in." Reddick didn't respond. He couldn't. As they loaded him into the back of a government SUV, Malik stepped back and let the moment breathe. The man who called homeless veterans trash was bleeding in cuffs. The people he tried to silence now held the proof of everything. The storm had broken, and justice had walked in through the front door with cameras rolling. The hearing room inside the Capitol was packed, not just with lawmakers and media, but with veterans. Some wore dress blues, some wore patches and ball caps. Many wore pain quietly on their faces. Zahara Cole stood tall at the center table. Her charcoal gray suit was sharp, her notes were minimal, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady and precise. "Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to present evidence that should never have needed collecting in the first place." She paused, locking eyes with several members across the bench. "We are not here to argue opinion. We are here to present fact. Because when justice becomes optional for those without shelter, democracy becomes conditional." She clicked her remote. The screen behind her changed. Thousands of internal emails scrolled slowly across the display. Headlines read Operation Street, Clear Vagrant Reduction Report, Bonus Quotas. This, Zahara said, gesturing calmly, is from internal communications within a group calling itself the Sentinels. Officers in 15 towns, Ashridge was just the beginning, using tactics designed to forcibly remove homeless veterans under the guise of public safety. A new image blinked on screen. A paused body cam frame. A man curled against a dumpster, blood on his cheek. Badge number visible. Zahara's voice dipped lower. "We have video footage, recorded confessions, and most damning of all, financial trails that link police departments to private development interests through shell corporations like Valeron Industries." Gasps in the room. One lawmaker shifted in his seat. Another stared stone-faced, jaw clenched. Zahara continued, "We are submitting this evidence to not only prosecute those responsible, but to prevent future abuse. Today I present draft language for a new federal bill, the Homeless and Veteran Protection Oversight Act." She turned a page, held it up. This bill would mandate federal review of any local law enforcement agency interacting with homeless individuals. It would require body camera usage, ban off-the-books detainment, and establish a special federal task force to protect homeless veterans from discrimination and abuse. Cameras clicked. One senator stood. "Miss Cole," he said, "what do you say to those who claim these are just isolated incidents?" Zahara didn't blink. "Then let them isolate this," she said, holding up a folder. 112 sworn testimonies, 37 hours of video, over 400 pages of financial transactions, and the names of 3 deputy attorneys who knew and did nothing. The room fell still. In the back, Malik stood silently with folded arms. Rachel sat next to him, holding back tears, and seated beside them, a Vietnam veteran gripped his cane, whispering, "Finally." That evening, the story aired across every major news network. The headline read, "When the Forgotten Spoke and Washington Listened." And for the first time in years, a wave of hope began sweeping across the country, not from a podium, but from the people who had been stepped on for too long. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. The sign outside the newly painted storefront read Bryant's Brew in hand-carved wood. Below it, in smaller lettering, "A place to rest, a place to rebuild." Inside, the scent of roasted coffee beans mixed with the faint aroma of cinnamon muffins baking in the back. But what struck people most wasn't the menu, it was the staff. Every apron worn behind the counter covered a story of survival. Rachel stood at the front register smiling as she handed a coffee to a man in a wheelchair. "First cup's on the house, Sergeant," she said, slipping a loyalty card into his pocket. "And every Monday's your day now." The man, once homeless, now employed as the cafe's delivery coordinator, nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the dignity returned to him in such a simple moment. The space buzzed with quiet energy. Soft jazz played on a loop. A group of college volunteers folded napkins beside a former Navy medic who now trained others in basic first aid. At the back, a chalkboard read, "Today's mission: serve with dignity. Listen like it matters. Everyone deserves both." Malik came in through the side door just after sunrise, as he always did. He wore no uniform, no badge, no ribbon, just a gray hoodie and jeans and that same dog tag now tucked beneath a fresh shirt. In one hand, he carried a mop. In the other, a thermos Alina had packed for him every morning since the trial. "Back room's clean," he said to Rachel quietly. "Chairs are straightened. I fixed the door hinge, too." "You know you don't have to do all this," she replied, handing him a fresh cup of coffee. Malik took it, staring at the steam. "I know." She watched him for a beat, trying to find words for what he'd given her. He never wanted the spotlight. He'd turned down a full-time advisory position with the state's Veteran Affairs Board just last week. When asked why, he'd simply replied, "Let someone else sit at the table. I'll build the chairs." He lived now in a small upstairs unit above the new PTSD recovery center, Malik's house, they'd called it, despite his protest. But every morning before sunrise, he helped sweep the halls, organize supplies, and greet the new residents, most of them scared, disoriented, and struggling to believe anyone still cared. But Malik did, and that was enough to start something. That morning, he stood by the window and looked out at the street where he'd once been dragged away like trash. Now it bustled with laughter, the smell of coffee, and people choosing to be better. He didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge. He just needed that street to stay open, and for no man in uniform or rags to ever be invisible again. The chamber of the United States Capitol was quiet, so quiet you could hear the subtle clicks of pens and the rustle of paper. Lights from the media gallery illuminated the wooden podium at the front of the hearing room, but the man approaching it wore no suit, no flag pin, just a clean pressed shirt and a presence that made people straighten in their seats. Malik Bryant stepped up his shoulders, squared his eyes, steady. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at the elected officials seated before him, some leaning forward with genuine interest, others shifting uncomfortably under his gaze. "My name is Malik Bryant," he began. "I served 3 tours in Iraq, Fallujah, Sadr City, Mosul. I lost friends in each one. I carried some of them myself." His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "I didn't come here today to ask for pity," he continued. "I didn't come to make a show. I came to remind this country of something simple." He paused, letting the silence expand, letting it land. "Every man and woman who put on the uniform and said, 'I'm willing to die for this place,' deserves the right to live in it with dignity." One of the senators nodded slowly, eyes glossed over. Malik's expression didn't soften. "For years, people like me, black, homeless, broken, but still breathing, we were treated like threats instead of reminders. And I get it. It's easier to ignore someone like me than to face the failure that put me on the sidewalk." He drew a long breath, hands gripping the edge of the podium, not for nerves, but to anchor the truth. Justice isn't charity. It's not something you give out when the cameras are on. It's something you guarantee when no one's watching. He looked left, then right, locking eyes with each lawmaker, like he was speaking to them one by one. "So I'm asking this country to stop pretending. Stop saying thank you for your service, while letting men like me rot in alleyways. If this country still stands for anything, prove it." No applause. No music cue, just Malik pushing the mic aside and stepping away. Someone tried to rise to speak to offer gratitude or praise, but Malik held up one hand and shook his head. "I don't need the spotlight," he said, walking toward the back of the room. "I've stood in real fire. I just want people to stop pretending they don't see it when it's burning here at home." He exited the room without turning back, while behind him, lawmakers stared at one another, shaken silent, and finally some of them ashamed. In that moment, he had said more than 1,000 speeches combined, not by shouting, but by standing tall and walking away. Because sometimes true power doesn't ask for a microphone, it earns its silence. 14 states, that's how many opened formal investigations within just 2 weeks of Zahara's testimony and the overwhelming public outcry. Governors, attorneys general, and civil rights commissions, all under pressure from citizens who no longer wanted silence to be the norm. The morning after the hearings aired, Valoron Industries' name disappeared from several government procurement databases. By the end of the week, they were officially blacklisted from federal contracts. Their CEO resigned. Stockholders pulled out. What was once hailed as a revitalization firm was now recognized as a predator masked in progress. In a press conference outside the Justice Department, Attorney General Flores spoke firmly, reading from a simple white sheet of paper. 42 officers from 7 counties are now under federal indictment for conspiracy civil rights violations and financial fraud. A ripple of gasps spread through the crowd of journalists. But Zahara didn't smile. She stood beside Flores with her arms crossed, eyes hard. She knew it wasn't the end. "It's not about revenge," she later told a local news anchor. "It's about restoring a balance that should never have been broken." Meanwhile, Malik declined every interview. He stayed back in Ashridge, sweeping the entrance of the PTSD Recovery Center each morning, waving quietly at the veterans, who now stopped by the center, not as shadows, but as men and women reclaiming purpose. Alina posted a photo, no caption, of Malik handing a coffee to a man in a wheelchair outside Bryant's Brew. It went viral in hours. Comment after comment read like confessions. "My uncle served and died on the street. I was scared to speak up. Not anymore. Justice doesn't have an expiration date." Even late-night hosts couldn't ignore it. They aired clips of the congressional hearing, the rescue of Rachel, the takedown of Reddick. Not to mock, but to honor. For once, the media didn't sensationalize a fall, they celebrated a rebuild. And slowly, town by town, people began to look around and ask themselves harder questions. Who was living in the alley behind their grocery store? Who was sitting on that bench across the courthouse? And what had they ignored because it was easier? Change didn't come as a tidal wave. It came as a current, slow, persistent, reshaping the ground beneath their feet. That was the lesson. It was never about the single act of justice. It was about holding on when the cameras were gone, when the hashtags faded. And somewhere in Ashridge, while politicians debated new legislation and pundits analyzed the case, Malik sat quietly on the back steps of the cafe, a worn book in his hand, nodding gently as another veteran stepped through the door. No medals, no fanfare, just dignity, just home, just enough. Because sometimes the greatest victories don't end in applause. They endure in silence and in the lives reclaimed because someone chose to stand. The evening sun filtered through the curtains of Malik's new one-bedroom apartment, modest, quiet, and finally his. On the kitchen table sat a small wooden box, worn at the edges, hinges a little rusted. It had moved with him from war zones to shelters to the abandoned train depot, and now to this place of stillness. He pulled the chair out slowly, his knees cracking. No one else was home. No cameras, no speeches. Just a man, a memory, and what time hadn't managed to take from him. With careful fingers, Malik opened the box. Inside were 5 dog tags. 4 of them belonged to men he had served with, men who didn't make it back from Fallujah. Each tag still carried a trace of sand in its etching, as if the desert hadn't let go either. The 5th tag was new, wrapped in a small cloth tied with string. He untied it, revealing the metal plate, Reddick Daniel, United States Army. There was a folded note inside. "I know my brother did terrible things, but once he believed in duty. I just wanted something of him to rest in a place where justice still means something." Emily Reddick Malik sat in silence for a long time. He turned the tag over, ran his thumb across the cold surface. His breathing was steady, but his chest tightened. Not with rage, but something else. Something older, more human. He placed the tag next to the others. Not above, not apart. Equal. just as they had been once young men in the same uniform, scared and brave at the same time. Ai roi kung tung la mot dua tre, he whispered the words in Vietnamese from a medic he once served beside. Then slowly, in English, everyone was a child once, but who we choose to become, that's on us. He closed the box gently. There was no forgiveness in his voice, no grand declaration, just acknowledgement that even monsters come from somewhere, that even justice doesn't erase pain, it simply redirects it toward truth. And for Malik, that was enough. He stood up, walked to the window, and watched the last orange glow disappear behind the rooftops. Behind him, on the table, the box stayed shut, but in it was a small, quiet truth carried not by vengeance, but by a man who had seen enough death to understand that healing starts when hate is no longer the loudest voice in the room. Snow fell in gentle flurries, coating the streets of Ashridge in a soft white hush. Streetlights buzzed faintly overhead. The town had changed, no doubt, but for some, the weight of silence and cold hadn't lifted. Malik walked alone, hands deep in the pockets of his old army coat, the same one he wore in Iraq. It was a habit now, walking, not for destination, but to stay in motion, to stay human. He turned onto 7th and noticed a figure huddled by the alley wall, knees drawn up, face buried in a threadbare hoodie. A young man, barely 20, maybe younger, black, skin-chapped sneakers soaked, shoulders shaking not just from cold, but the kind of tremble that came from not being seen. Malik stopped. He didn't speak right away, just stood watching the boy's breath curl into the cold. Slowly, he lowered himself to the ground beside him. His knees ached from age and battles, but he made the descent anyway. The boy startled and looked up, eyes wary. "I don't want trouble, man," he mumbled. Malik met his gaze calm. "I used to be where you are," he said, voice steady, cold, angry, invisible. The boy blinked, not sure how to respond. Malik reached into his coat and pulled out a small paper bag, 2 sandwiches, and a wrapped protein bar. He handed it over without a word. After a pause, he added softly, "If you're ready, I'll walk with you. I won't promise it'll be easy, but I know the way out." The boy looked down at the food, then back at Malik. For the first time that night, someone saw him, not as a threat, not as trash, but as a person. They sat for a moment longer in silence, 2 generations, 2 versions of the same struggle. Then together they stood. As they began walking down the snowy sidewalk, a narrator's voice cut through, warm and grounded. If you saw someone being degraded, silenced, or forgotten, would you have the courage to stand up? This story is one of many. Real stories, real people. If you believe the truth deserves a voice, subscribe, share, speak, because silence protects power, but truth builds justice. Thank you for walking this journey with us. The screen faded to black, and in the stillness, viewers across the country sat frozen, not out of shock, but out of recognition. Because for the first time, they weren't just watching a story, they were standing in it. The story of Malik Bryant is not just about one man, it is about all of us. It is a reflection of the systems we tolerate, the voices we choose to hear or silence, and the choices we make when no one is watching. He didn't ask to be a hero, he didn't seek revenge, he simply refused to kneel before injustice. In a world that had every reason to break him, he chose instead to rebuild others. With kindness, with resolve, with dignity. Now we ask you, what would you have done? If you were the waitress hearing those words at the diner, would you have spoken up? If you saw someone beaten, not because of guilt, but because of their skin, would you turn away or turn on your camera? Would you risk your comfort to protect someone else's right to exist with honor? These questions aren't just for this story, they're for the real world you wake up to tomorrow. So if this story made you pause, if it made you feel, don't let it end here, leave a comment below, share your thoughts. Tell us, what does justice mean to you? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, not just watched, then subscribe to this channel. Because the more voices that gather here, the louder we become in the places that try to stay silent. Thank you for walking with us. Your presence matters more than you know.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.